What we've really been focusing on this year is what are we really good at and where do we want to develop? We're merger integration. That's something that we do very well. That's one pillar. The second one we call delivery excellence. And the last one is a bit of a hodgepodge. We're calling it our cloud data and AI pillar. We took a view of our skill set landscape and said, where are we deep across this group of people? And that's how we got to those three pillars.
Hey, Tommy, welcome.
Hey, Michael. How are you today?
Yeah, great. Great to have you on.
Awesome. Thank you.
You have a very interesting story, one that we're going to get into because you were part of a smaller boutique firm. That firm was purchased. You worked for a larger firm. Then you went back out as a team to establish this new consulting business. And that company is Activera, where you are part of right now. And in the first year of business, you've done, well into 7 figures of business, which is pretty incredible, for within 12 months of launch. But there's a backstory to that. And, I know you're going to get into that. I want to have everyone kind of hear more of your story. So why don't we kind of go back in time a little bit? Can you describe the initial consulting firm that you had, just high level, what were you doing? How many employees? How much, revenue did you get it up to? And then ultimately, who acquired it?
Absolutely. So the firm was actually started in 2002. It was called Enaxis Consulting, ENAXIS. It was started by 2 individuals who left Deloitte and decided, hey, we want to give this a shot ourselves, right? And so it sort of grew, I would say, pretty quickly at first, and then slowly started to scale and scale and scale. It was 2013 that I actually joined the company. It was a boutique management IT advisory firm for oil and gas. I'd say about 90% of our business was oil and gas or energy customers. We did have about 10% in airlines as well. And the reason for that is typically when oil and gas is not doing well, airlines are doing great because they have to buy all the fuel and they're buying it at a much lower cost. And so their margins are a lot better. And then, conversely, when oil and gas is doing well, maybe airlines not so much. So we thought it was a good sort of balance of 2 industries to focus on. Now, when COVID hit and oil and gas went to negative $40 a barrel for a very short period of time, and nobody was traveling, right? It may have been a bit more of a challenge to have both of those, but who could have seen that one coming? And at the end of the day, we didn't have to worry about that because in 2018, once we reached about 100 people and $20 million in revenue, we became a company of interest to a larger firm. In this case, it was Accenture, and they decided to come in and purchase us. And a large majority of us came into their energy industry practice, given the fact that our boutique firm was more focused on the energy and oil and gas space.
Before we kind of go into that next step of you now being part of Accenture, I'm just wondering. I mean, you came into the business. You weren't a founder of that initial business, but you came in a few years into it. What did that mean for you? I mean, did you get some good equity when that company was acquired, or how did that kind of impact your life?
So they did have a partnership model. I was not a part of it. I actually came straight into Enaxis from business school. And I was a career switcher in business school. I was a financial analyst previously and wasn't really truly aware of consulting and all it could potentially offer. But I discovered that in business school and knew once I graduated, I wanted to get into it. So I started at sort of a lower level, a senior consultant, right? And typically, it varies across consulting firms, but there's a typical ladder, right? I mean, you've got analyst, consultant, senior manager, senior manager, director, partner, something along those lines. So I came in as a senior consultant, made it to manager within 2 years, made it to senior manager 2 years after that. And then I was a senior manager for 3 years once we were acquired. And so for me personally, I hadn't gotten a chance yet to get up to that equity level, but there were a number of partners that did have equity in the firm. And there were bonuses, of course, once we were acquired, which essentially were meant to keep us around for a certain number of years. Right. So once these larger firms acquire the talent and the clients and the networks, they want to make sure those folks stick around for 3-4 years to make sure they're getting the value out of that acquisition.
Accenture acquired that firm. You are now part of this, much larger organization. But ultimately you didn't stay there. So I'm wondering, first, let's just actually explore. I'd love to hear, are there any big lessons that you learned or anything that, was very different for you when you started working at Accenture, that you would just say like, yeah, this was very positive. This really, opened my eyes to something, or maybe there's some principles, right? Or lessons that you felt were very valuable and that you even took to the next company that you were part of starting.
It's a bit of an understatement for you to say it's moving into a different world, because it's a different universe. I mean, we went from 100 people firm to, I think, last time I checked, it was about a month ago, they were at 743,000 people, right? So that is literally the largest consulting firm in the world. In fact, a funny tidbit, the Netflix show Stranger Things? I think most people have heard of that one.
I know the name.
You know
I
the
haven't
name.
watched it.
Okay, well, you're missing out if you haven't seen that one. But very popular show on Netflix. And actually, for the last season, Accenture did their visual effects.
Wow. Okay.
You don't think of Accenture as anything more than maybe an ERP implementer or digital transformation or whatever, but they're so sprawling and wide ranging that they've got operations folks and strategy folks and change folks, and I mean it's just visual effects. It's all over the place, and so that was one big difference, is trying to understand where do I fit within this broader entity. And how do I sort of make a name for myself? Where can I go? Where are my boundaries? And those boundaries are actually clearly set because it's a public company, right? There are shareholders, there's bureaucracy, there's hierarchy, and you have to be able to navigate those things. And that's, to be honest, just personally, not something that I'm interested in navigating. I like the flat hierarchy of a boutique firm. Be able to pick up the phone and call the partner or the managing director, right? And they'll answer.
Is that ultimately kind of what led to you deciding to leave Accenture?
Yeah, partially it is. It is. And I'll give you one quick concrete example. I remember, so it's a bit unconventional for consulting, I would say, but in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. So I majored in Spanish, and I took Portuguese and French, and I studied abroad, and I liked it. I liked languages. I liked different cultures, and I followed my passions, right? So when I landed in the energy group within Accenture, I knew that one of the clients I was working with, as well as Accenture themselves, had Latin American presence. And I started engaging with those folks, and I was, trying to get on sales calls with them and trying to help build out their content. And just because I wanted to get involved. And about 2 months into doing that, I wouldn't say I got my hands slapped, but I was told bluntly by my people lead at the time, you need to stop doing that. Because if you make a sale, let's say in Latin America, it's not going to help you. Right? It's not going to help our business because we're regionally focused. We're North America. We're in Houston. If you sell something down there, it doesn't affect us in any way. So it's not going to help you in your career. And I didn't like that answer. I like to go off and do the things that I'm passionate about. And I was enjoying that. And to be told, no, you're not allowed to do that it's just personally something I didn't appreciate. But going back to just the very first thing you said is like, what did I learn? There was a lot of good. There was a lot of good at Accenture. There's a lot of smart people. They're approaching solutions to a lot of interesting problems that are happening across a number of different industries. And I would say overall, my experience was positive at Accenture. It just comes down to personally how you like to operate and how you like to engage with people. And for me, that large firm culture and mindset was something I wasn't interested in continuing for an extended period of time in my career.
Right. So I know when we spoke before hitting record, I mean, you shared with me that within the first 12 months or so, because you're just kind of getting that 12-month anniversary of launching the new business after Accenture, you're already a multi-million-dollar consulting business. And that might be very surprising to hear for some. But as you shared with me, there's a bit of a secret to that, or a bit of a reason of why you were able to do that. And if I understand it, it's because a group of you who already built that previous company that was acquired by Accenture, then decided to leave Accenture and kind of start again another boutique consulting firm. Can you just kind of explain that story a little bit? How many people, founded this Activera, the new company, and kind of what went into allowing you to generate that level of business within your first year?
Absolutely. And I'll start with my own personal journey of it, because I don't understand the inner workings of other people's reasons. But there came a point at Accenture where I started doing some soul searching, and what do I want to do? I've got 25 years left in my career, or something around there, right? Do I want to pound the pavement as an Accenture company man for the next 25 years? Do I want to go into industry, right? I've been in oil and gas for the last decade, right? Why not? Should I go independent route? Just become an independent contractor? I'd been at a super major here in Houston for that entire decade.
Just explain what does super major mean for people who aren't familiar with that
Sorry,
term.
yeah. So super major is typically like an integrated oil and gas company. Like they have upstream division where they're trying to get oil and gas out of the ground, like drilling and completions, exploration and production. There's a midstream, which is transporting. So let's say pipeline or by ship or by rail. And then there's the downstream, which is actually getting it to the gas pumps. There's also refineries and chemicals and that side of the house. And super majors are the really big companies you've heard of that typically have all three of those segments. So, the Chevrons and the Exxons and the Shells and the BPs, right? Those are considered the super majors of oil and gas. And so, do I want to go work for one of those? Right? That was one of the things I was thinking about. But after a lot of deep internal thought, right, I realized for me personally, again, it's a personal choice. Working at a boutique firm is just best for me. It gives me a lot of optionality to go to different clients and to work on lots of different problems. It allows me not to be alone. I'm not one of those people where you can lock them into a room for 3 days and say, get really deep on a topic and be a subject matter expert. I have to have people to soundboard off of. I need to work with a team to be most effective. And I've just learned that about myself over years and years of working. And a boutique firm allows me to do that effectively. And so it seemed to me to be the right choice. And it just so happened that at that time, one of the original founders of an Axis, back in 2002, who had left from Deloitte, had left Accenture a year previous. And, he had a non-compete, right? Couldn't do anything in the space for a year. So after that year was up, right, there was a discussion. It's like, hey, we have the opportunity now to get the people that we know, that we've worked with, that we like, with a varied skill set, pull them all together and do it again. Right. And this time we can be collectively responsible for building out the culture and the community and ensuring that sort of camaraderie that occurs at a boutique firm. And once I had that discussion, I realized that's it. Right. For me, that's what I have to do. That's what excites me the most.
Do you remember, going back now, I guess about a year or so ago, what did you all do? Well, actually, before we get to that, so how many total people came together and as co-founders to start Activera?
So this go around, it's eight of us, and we can talk about the pros and cons of that.
Yes,
in a minute if you like.
I do want to come to that, but before we do that, so take me back to the year you got started. There's 8 of you, or maybe there was slightly fewer at the beginning. I'm not sure, but what I'm interested in is like, what did you do initially to bring on that first or second client? Because I sometimes ask that question to people who are earlier stage, or when they were earlier stage, but as a solo consultant or a very small firm, your situation is a little bit different because you are the group of you were very seasoned consultants who had worked both in a boutique, then as part of one of the world's largest consulting firms, now going back out into a boutique kind of situation. So I'm interested, like, how did you go to market? What did you all do in terms of your specialization and focus? Who did you target? How were you actually able to win some initial business? Kind of just, if you take me back to that kind of go to market strategy, that initial push, if you will.
as you mentioned, we're a year. It's of last week. As of last week, we are technically at a year. But since we have that 20-year plus pedigree in the market, over that time, each of the co-founders has built up a resume, some experience, some networks across a number of different companies. And when we decided to launch, that was the first thing we did. Was, hey, we are going off. We're doing our own thing. Most people already knew about Anaxis and that we were acquired. And it was a very easy conversation to say, we're doing it again. You already know us. You already trust us, right? So, hey, we're available. We're open.
Who were you going to? Like, who were you targeting? Was it just anyone, any type of business, or were you all aligned on let's be very intentional and specifically target, a certain industry or channel or type of buyer?
Yeah. So it's twofold. The first is, yes, very focused on energy and the office of the CIO, CTO, CDO, because what we do is IT advisory in oil and gas. And typically, chief information officer, technology officer, data officer, they've got a portfolio of projects and programs that they're trying to make successful, whether that's analytics or cloud or IoT or integrations, et cetera. And we help accelerate business outcomes for those projects. That's really our main focus. And so we did go back and target those, general managers, directors, C-suite folks to say, hey, we're available. We think we can add value. Where do you need us? Right. And that was sort of the initial foray into our target persona, if you will. But in addition to that, we don't have, as a startup company, the luxury of just focusing in that niche in order to grow the business. And so another thing that we did was go back through all of our LinkedIn folks, the people that we haven't talked to in a while, reactivating that network, and ensuring that they know now, hey, I've switched. Hey, now I'm available. You're going to get that tier 2 consulting firm, that Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, EY, whatever. You're going to get that quality of person for a boutique firm because we don't have all the overhead, right? A boutique firm cost, I should say, right? Because we don't have all of that overhead.
So was that the initial kind of value proposition, if you will, that you all were using when you're going out, saying, hey, we can help you to do X, and you're going to get the same kind of value that you would get from a top tier firm, but you're going to get it at a boutique price? Was that the message, or something different? Essentially, how did you go to market both in the oil and gas companies and, kind of the C-suite of oil and gas, as well as just for broadly others that you targeted through LinkedIn and so forth?
So if you want me to be candid with you, which I'm assuming you want me to, the initial thinking was, yes, that makes sense to us, that boutique firm price, but the same level of quality. But, as things evolve, you realize, isn't that what every boutique firm says, right? How is that a differentiator, right? And so it's sort of evolved into trying to get people engaged to see our work. I'll give you a couple examples. Okay. I went back and reactivated my network. Somebody I'd met at a PMI, which is the Project Management Institute. It was a conference that, 10 years ago that I met this person. We kept in touch, right? I mean, this is 10 years of cultivating a relationship. And, I wasn't thinking of selling him anything at the time. He was just a good guy, right? We'd go out to lunch, we'd have coffee, whatever. At some point, right, he gets promoted to the director of the enterprise PMO at a large utility. And, that's about the time that Activera is kicking off. And so I go, take him to lunch, congratulations on the new promotion and, getting all this. And we just naturally start talking about what things are you coming across? What challenges do you have? What problems? And so what we did in that instance was we actually ran a workshop, just for free, right? Just to come in, talk to the PMO, talk to them about their challenges. Where are they today? Where do they want to be? How do you fill that gap from a maturity perspective? And we provided deliverables to them as a result of that. And then we get the work, right? We get the work to come in and do that. And so in that case, right, price is taken into consideration, but that wasn't really the main way we went about promoting that. It was more, hey, let's get in there and let us show you what we can do. and then, you're likely to move forward with us, given our strength of deliverables.
Kind of talk me through the thinking of in that scenario. And I'm guessing there was maybe similar kind of conversations that your other partners had with their own networks, but the decision to say, hey, we'll do a workshop for you and we're going to essentially invest time, energy, resources, money, into doing this workshop, but at no cost. Was that just very clear to you and to your, the whole team right up front, or was there discussion around, should we charge for something like this? Or should we just do it like, what kind of open that box up for me and let me know, how did you all as a company approach that?
I think it was more of an individual basis. So the way that it worked out with the co-founders that we were talking about before is that some of them got staffed immediately, at 100% of their time, and they were fully dedicated to their client and accelerating their deliverables. Whereas some of the other of us naturally were not put onto a client immediately, or were at some small percentage of time, and were therefore more responsible for business development. And so it was more up to the individual of how they want to go about it. We've always had this concept of a wedge offering, right? But as to whether or not you have someone pay for that versus you do it for free, I think it's very situationally dependent. In this instance, it just made more sense for me to sort of prove out what we can do, being confident in myself, in my own deliverables, and in the team I was working with at Activera, that we're going to provide something valuable, that they're going to see that value, right? And that they're going to want to spend money on future things. And that's what happened, not only in that instance, but in an additional instance as well, where we ran a workshop last summer for a government contractor, actually, that's here in town. And we're continuing to work with them based off of that initial workshop. But in both of those instances, it was the relationship and the trust were already there. And so for me, it made more sense to do something like that for free, because we'd spent years building up those relationships and proving it out to the rest of their team of what we can deliver. Whereas if it's a new sort of a colder client, or you don't have that relationship, it might make more sense to charge some nominal fee for a workshop, let's say $5,000 for 2 weeks of work, let's just say. And then at the end of that, right, we could then move forward with additional work. So it's situationally dependent. And I think a lot of it has to do with relationship.
So it sounds like, for the people that you already have an existing relationship with, right, it's very relational, right? Kind of, I guess the pun is intended there, but it's about meeting them, right? Going out for a lunch, seeing what's going on, looking for opportunities to add value. And then in your case, you've said that, offering some kind of a free workshop or spending some time together without charging is kind of maybe one of the go-to approaches that has worked very well for you. If you look at situations where you have not had there hasn't been a relationship, right? You've identified kind of a very high value prospective client. What have you found in the past, but even today, just kind of for taking all of your experience into account, what is the go-to approach that you use when you have identified a high value ideal client and you want to kind of get a seat at the table, you want to be able to have a meeting or appointment with them? How do you approach that?
So there's varying degrees of relationship, right? And the ones that I mentioned with the free workshops, I mean, that was multi-year relationships, but there may be other situations where you've met someone at a conference, that you've known them 6 months, you've taken them out to coffee, but it's a newer sort of relationship. In that case, you need to be okay with asking for that initial meeting, right? Hey, can we change it from a coffee? Can you introduce me to your boss? Can you introduce me to your team? And let's talk about some of the challenges that you're having. And in that case, I think it's sort of implicit in that there's going to be some paid work. I mean, we're consultants, right? Everybody understands that business model. But it again, I would go back to that situationally dependent. The way it might be helpful for you to understand how we run our sales process, so that we could talk you through those stages. So have you heard of the Miller-Hyman sales process? Is that familiar?
Yeah, break it down though for everyone who hasn't.
Sure. So there's essentially these phases that you go through within a deal. We capture in our CRM we have all of our leads. Okay. And that will be, hey, I'm taking this person out to a cup of coffee. This person is at this energy company and they're in this role. And this is one of our ideal clients, right? That lead may be nothing and it may turn into just a coffee, and that's perfectly fine, right? But we're at least targeting these folks. Then if we move into the next phase, that would be a qualified opportunity, right? And so that's, hey, during that coffee, we talked about a challenge they're having. We need to learn more about it so that we can determine whether or not we're a good fit to even solve the problem, right? Do we have the experience? Do we have the availability? So let's go have a more office focused visit. And that's that one I was just describing with the boss or with the team or with others to get a better sense of the opportunity itself. And at that point, you're just doing active listening. You're not trying to solve any problems whatsoever. Then there's a proposal phase, right? Like, have we submitted a proposal? And that will be, okay, we now understand the issue. And from what I had said earlier about the workshops, that's exactly what those workshops were designed to do. They were designed to help and provide some insight or guidance into what their problem is, like put a circle around it. But it was also to help us build the proposal. Because now, after having run that 90-minute workshop, which isn't a whole lot of time and effort, right? We understand very deeply what those challenges are. And so we can submit a much better proposal. Once you submit the proposal, there's typically a lag, especially if you have to get like an MSA, a master service agreement at a company to do business. And then after that is the statement of work itself, which is essentially that proposal we were talking about. And then there's a lot of legal, T's and C's that need to get ironed out. And so that's the next phase, is that we have a verbal from the client based on our proposal, our submitted proposal, but it's going through the legal process. And so we've got a bucket for that. And then finally, once it makes through there, we have a closed won and a closed lost. It can go to closed lost at any point, right? At any of those phases. But then if it makes it through verbal and legal and we get the signed, executed statement of work, then that will be a closed won for us. And so how things make it through that process is just so widely variable based on the different types of discussions that we're having, the different sizes of companies, the people with whom we're engaging, the relationships that we have cultivated. But if you keep in mind that general flow, it can help you at least stay on track to try to get to closure.
If we were to kind of look at averages, I know that averages aren't always the most valuable or helpful to look at, but your sales cycle on average, what would you say that it might take, for a typical client, from just kind of laying out what you just, shared? What does that look like from, the first meeting to, or first kind of interaction to getting somebody to closed won? What does that generally take?
And I do think it's best to talk about that in averages, because I've seen closed won take a day and I've seen closed won take 2 years, right? So it is variable, but on average, I would say there's usually, if we do like a workshop sort of thing, let's say that happens in midsummer, where July, maybe August, that kind of thing. The expectation is that we'll close on that work in October. And then, begin working on it in November. So what is that? July to August, September, 3 to 4 months, I would say, to make it through the MSA and the statement of work and the rewrites and the getting the team together and picking a start and a kickoff date and getting everybody on board. I would say 3 to 4 months is reasonable.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, is there anything that you could, maybe you've worked on that you feel has helped to speed up or accelerate the sales cycle?
So having templates already ready is actually super helpful for especially smaller companies, when you don't have to deal with big procurement departments who want everything on their paper and, all of their stuff. If you're working with smaller or even mid-sized firms, right, we have a copy of our standard mutual non-disclosure agreement, an MNDA. That's usually our first pass, even before, that's like after a lead, like, hey, let's get an NDA in place so we can talk openly about your challenges. Then the MSA, we have a template, right? We've used it in a couple cases for smaller companies and jettisoned it if the larger companies say no. And same thing with the statement of work. We have a baseline template that we use. and we will submit our proposal in that statement of work, which has some legalese in it as well related to things in the MSA, et cetera. But we have a standard way of going about creating and submitting those documents. We also have a pricing sheet. So we've got a list of all of our different levels. We talked about that ladder before, like the analyst, consultant, senior consultant, and we have what we call like a loaded cost rate, right? Which is basically salary plus benefits plus vacation plus whatever. And we sort of say on average, the senior consultant is this, right? That's that loaded cost rate. And then we understand what the client is willing to pay for that level, usually within a range. And so we have templates that allow us to create something very quickly, a pricing structure that will show our margin and how we can build our team most effectively to provide to the client so that we can turn things like that around very quickly. So I would say that's a best practice, would be having some standard templates that allow you to move quickly, because you want to be, as a small boutique firm, you want to be agile. You want to be easy to work with, because the bigger companies can't do that.
You're bringing elements of productization, right, to the model, even though it sounds like, I mean, your services might be quite highly customized for clients, but the elements of the sales process, you definitely productize. When you talk about pricing, so ultimately when you're going to the client, is most of your pricing is a project? Is like a project-based fee? Is it an hourly fee? Is it value-based? What is the method that you're using, or the structure that your pricing strategy is kind of based on?
The large majority of it's just time and materials, right? I mean, we'll say this person for the next 6 months will be billable at 40 hours per week, right? At this hourly rate, right? And that's kind of how we come up with the total cost. If there are travel expenses or others, we usually have something in the contract to say that we can bill those back to the client. Uh, Personally, I would like to get more into the value-based deal stuff. And we've talked about it in a couple of different scenarios, but have yet to pull the trigger on those. But we've got some discussions coming up in the generative AI space that I think might be, might be better suited for something like that, rather than a typical hourly rate. But at least the way that we've done things so far, it's just a time and materials contract.
What's the main thing holding you guys back, or the reason why you have not moved more into, let's say, value pricing and have stuck more with time and materials?
So a lot of the things that we do, and I can talk to you a bit more about like our top line businesses and our services and how those have evolved over time if you want to go that direction. But a lot of the things we do are project based, running projects, running programs, and it's more challenging to attribute and assign specific value. Even if the program itself saves $300 million for the client, how do you go about saying, well, this project manager made the team 0.03% more effective, and therefore, right? It's just the type of work that we do. It's a bit more challenging, which is why I mentioned like the generative AI stuff and the analytics. Because if you're helping run a proof of concept or a pilot, right, and you've done something similar to that in the past, which we have a better sense of, once we get in there, if we qualify the opportunity well and we understand the problem they're trying to solve, and it's one that we have previously solved, then we're going to have a sense of what the value is associated with that, and would be then more comfortable doing something where we get a base fee, right? But if we hit certain milestones or thresholds, then we will get more money, or if we don't hit them, we get less money, right? And so we'd be more comfortable doing something like that where we've done it before, and it's a bit of a different type of engagement.
Got it. Okay, so today you're at about 20 people, and I'm wondering how you go about kind of staffing or hiring and bringing people on. Do you hire people and kind of build a team and then go out and hunt for that work, or are you out there already working on, let's say, larger deals? And feel comfortable that when those deals land, you'll be able to find the people that you need to staff them. Kind of what's your approach to that balance of hiring versus taking on work?
And my gosh, is it a balance? It's like being on a tightrope on a unicycle, right? it's very challenging, especially for a small company, to have that right balance. Because if you've got too deep of a bench, then you're cash poor, right? But if you don't have a deep enough bench, when you land those new projects, you can't staff them. So there's this ever existing challenge internally for balancing that. And what we've done to positively affect those outcomes is invest in both the supply side as well as the demand side. And so what I mean by that is we have 20 people. Not all of those are billable consultants. We did go out and hire a dedicated business development manager or executive, right? And his focus is getting work, right? And if he does his job, then we're going to have that demand coming through, right? And we expect him to do his job. And he just joined 3 months ago. He's already doing a great job. So if we can get that demand, that's perfect. But that's only one side of the house. We also invested in a talent manager, and she not only does our recruiting and has recruited for some of the biggest tech firms, even Fang, before. So she's got a really good sense of how to bring the right type of resources into the technology space. And she's controlling our entire hire to retire cycle and sort of building out what that looks like and the cultural aspects and the onboarding and the engagement and all of that stuff. And that's really the supply side. That's finding the best people, bringing them in, making sure that we can stand behind that quality we talked about earlier. And so if those two people are doing their jobs very effectively, we've got the demand, we've got the supply, and we can keep those things in balance. If one of them doesn't do their job, we got a problem. So you have to invest, at least we think you need to heavily invest in those two things. Even as a small company, maybe you're a bit cash strapped. Those things are both very important.
Yeah. So it sounds like those two need to be on regular kind of communication to make sure that there's the right balance of, do we have something coming in potentially soon? Do we need the right people? So that makes a lot of sense. I would like, Tommy, if you could give just a quick high level kind of, concise, breakdown of the typical services that you provide, and also a range of, what does that typically look like, right? So if you're doing X type of work, right, what does the average engagement look like? Is it 50,000? Is it 500,000? Is it, 1.5 million or maybe significantly more or less? But kind of just give us a sense of the lay of the land when it comes to your current offerings and price points in general.
So let me, I will be concise, I promise, but let me just at least talk to you slightly about the evolution of our services, because I think that's important for your audience. When we first started, we put 4 buckets of things that we do, and that was strategy, execution, change, and data and analytics. Okay. That's everything in the world. I mean, literally, like from strategy all the way to any sort of execution to change management and like adoption, and then all the data, right? So we felt like we're just being too broad, right? In that respect. And we had examples of things that we did in those buckets in the past, and there was a story there. But what we've really been focusing on this year, as we're coming up and just past that 1 year mark, is let's get more focused on our service offerings. What are we really good at, right? What are we really, really good at? And where do we want to develop a little bit more? And so what we've done now, and this is sort of hot off the presses coming out in May, so it's actually even a little bit before it's on the press, is we're merger integration. That's something that we do very well. We have a playbook where, you've seen probably oil and gas, right? M&A is going wild right now. But we don't do any of the strategy work up front. What company am I going to buy? Why do I want to buy it? Oh, they've got that good acreage, or, right? We don't do any of that. After the announcement has been made and you go in and you do an assessment of the acquiring companies or the acquirees' IT systems and the acquiring company's IT systems, and how are those things going to talk to each other? What sort of applications are duplicative? Understanding that landscape and then actually executing on the project of doing that integration. That's something where we have really deep knowledge and experience. So that's one pillar that we're now really focused on. The second one we call delivery excellence. And that's that project, program, and portfolio management that I was talking to you before about. And It's waterfall, traditional project management, 5-phase sort of waterfall stuff. We also do agile, so Scrum, Kanban, and the scaled agile framework. And we can set up PMOs and LACEs, which are lean agile centers of excellence. So anything in the project space, we're really good at. And then we also lump change management under there because organizational design, behavioral change management, setting up a change management office, those sort of go part and parcel with effective projects. So that's delivery excellence. That's that second pillar. And the last one is a bit of a hodgepodge. We thought about calling it like digital or digital transformation, but that's so wide ranging again. We wanted to focus more. So we're calling it our cloud data and AI pillar. So we do have good experience in cloud migrations, like understanding, hey, we're an on-prem shop right now. Do we need to go to the cloud? If yes, is public okay? Or do we need private cloud? What about heavy seismic workloads? Does it make sense to maybe keep those on premise with a GPU cluster? Just giving you some examples, like making those decisions and helping with that migration. We have some good experience on the data side of the house with data strategy, management, governance.
Tom, and so just to jump in, sorry to interrupt, but I want to understand one thing. So, I mean, I know you mentioned you started off quite broad. Now you're starting to really ask that important question of, where can we create the most value, right? Where are we kind of like world class? And you've identified these three pillars. My question is, why not just have one pillar or two pillars? Like why three pillars or why more? Not that that's right or wrong, but just from the conversations you've had internally, I'm wondering, why not, if you've considered, and I'm guessing that you have at some point considered just like narrowing even more and just saying, we're going to only do this one thing, like just the post merger piece. And that's all we're going to do and build a business around. So can you just walk me through the thinking of why still have these other pillars?
Yeah. And I promised I would be concise before. Maybe I wasn't. So apologies there. But we did have that conversation. It's like, hey, if we want to focus, let's just be the merger integration play, right? We are that boutique firm. The problem with that, the way, and this circles back to something that we talked about earlier, was those 8 co-founders, right? Not all of us have deep merger integration experience. 2 or 3 of us really do, right? We've got playbooks, we've got accelerators, we've got whatever. But if we did that, there'd be 3 subject matter experts and a bunch of folks trying to figure it out. So what we did was we took a view of our landscape, our skill set landscape, and said, where are we deep across this group of people? And that's how we got to those 3 pillars.
And then just quickly give me a range of what's the average project, and it can be in each of those buckets if you want, or pillars. But just so people kind of have a sense. I know right now, you're 20-person firm, revenue. How specific you want to be in terms of people have an idea of where your revenue is at today?
Yeah, sure. So in the first year, our goal was at like $1 million in revenue, and we surpassed that a little bit. So that was our goal. Now we've got a goal of like 4.5 million revenue, and it's too early to tell because we're only in April as of this taping, but we're sort of on track, I would say, with growing our people, right? Because we have some expectations around how many people we're going to add and how many roles we're going to sell, and it's just TBD whether or not that works out. We typically sell folks in, I would say, the 175 to 225 range. And so if you're looking at that, somebody purchasing at that level, you're looking at between, maybe $350,000 to $400,000 a year for bringing on like a dedicated program manager, let's say, to run one of your merger integration. So that's kind of the range that we stick in. And again, it's going to be variable. That would be if it was one individual. Sometimes we have a pod of people. We've got a technology implementation that we're doing where we have 4 folks on there, and we'll do discounting, or we'll bring in more junior folks to make it more palatable monetarily. But just to give you a sense of where we are.
And if you were, looking at this just for people to have a good understanding of, in this kind of an industry with this kind of a model, just talk about margins. What would be a margin that somebody would be happy with?
Yeah, well, in consulting, that's a wide-ranging answer as well. But everybody knows that consulting is a business, right? You need revenue through the door, but if you're not making any margin, you're not making any money. And that's the way it is with any business. And so it typically in the consulting world, something around a 30% margin is reasonable. It's not to say that it can't, go higher than that. And, certain firms that will go unnamed would probably like to push more in the higher direction. But, for me personally, I think at some point it gets a little greedy, right? It's like maybe there's this concept of capitalism and, supply and demand. It's like, oh, well, the service is what they're willing to pay for it. But, sometimes you're pushing the boundaries of ethics just personally, right? Everybody has their own ethics. But if you're not making, at least, 25, right? I would say 20 is probably the bare minimum. Then you're just not able to support your business, right? Because you do have those back office folks. You do have those business development managers and the recruiting folks. And all of those people make the firm that you're dealing with more effective and better at serving you, right? And so in order for the ecosystem partner that you're bringing on to help you out, in order for them to do well and not have to worry about that stuff and just focus on your problems, there's an expectation of something around a 30% margin.
Listen, Tommy, I want to be conscious of the time that we have set for today. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we've kind of started, peeling back a little bit of the story. And I mean, you guys are so early in this business, even though you're quite senior with a lot of experience in past businesses and working for larger firms. So I first want to just thank you for coming on and sharing some of that story. I also want to make sure that people can learn more about what you and your company are working on. So where's the best place people should go to either connect or to learn more?
Sure. So we have activeraconsulting.com. Very easy to Google. Personally, I'm on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Tommy Ogden, also fairly easy to find. So please feel free to reach out. And it was a pleasure being on, Michael. Really appreciate it, and hope some of the things that we were talking about are of interest and help to your listeners.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tommy.